Captain Zara Velketh pressed her long fingers against the cold metal of the observation window. The stars that had always given her comfort now looked different. Dark shapes moved between them, blocking out the light. She had never seen so many enemy ships in one place before. The Vex Collective had brought their entire fleet to finish what they started 3 months ago. The Kethrin homeworld spun slowly below her feet. From this high up, she could see the bright fires burning in the cities. The emergency lights blinked red across the planet's surface like tiny drops of blood. Her people were dying down there, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Captain, we're getting another message from the surface," said Lieutenant Dex Morkala from his station. His voice shook as he spoke. Even the young ones were losing hope now. Zara turned away from the window. The command center of the orbital defense station looked empty, with only half the crew still at their posts. The others had already evacuated, with their families to the underground shelters. Those who stayed knew they probably would not see another sunrise. "Put it through," she said, walking to her command chair. The chair felt too big for her now, like everything else in her life. The hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. General Keth Velmorin appeared, his silver skin covered in dust and small cuts. Behind him, Zara could see the ruins of what used to be the Capitol building. Smoke rose from holes in the walls, and she could hear the sound of distant explosions. "Zara, we cannot hold them much longer," the general said. His words came out between heavy breaths. "The western cities have fallen. The northern shield generators are offline. We estimate 6 hours before they break through the last defensive line." 6 hours. Zara had hoped for at least 12. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her younger sister who lived in the western sector. The Vex did not take prisoners, they took something much worse. "What about the evacuation ships?" she asked. "Most made it to the outer colonies, but the Vex followed them. We lost contact with the Kepler station yesterday. The mining colonies on Vex 7 went dark this morning." The general paused, looking directly at her through the hologram. "Zara, we need to accept that this may be the end. Our weapons cannot penetrate their bioarmor. Our ships cannot match their speed. They adapt to everything we throw at them." The hologram cut out, leaving the command center in silence. Zara stared at the empty space where the general had been. In 300 years of space travel, the Kethrins had never met another species that could match their technology. They had built the most powerful energy weapons in known space. Their defensive shields could stop any attack they had ever faced. None of it mattered now. Lieutenant Dex looked up from his station. "Captain, should we send the surrender message?" Before Zara could answer, the communications array started beeping. The sound was different from the usual alerts. This was the old galactic emergency frequency, something they had not used in decades. Most species had forgotten it even existed. "Someone is trying to reach us on the emergency channel," said Communications Officer Nara Selveth. She was new to the station, fresh from the academy. Her hands moved quickly over the controls. "The signal is very weak. It's coming from outside our system." "Outside our system?" Zara felt a small spark of something she had not felt in weeks. "Who else is out there?" "I don't know, Captain. The signal is not Kethrin, and it's not Vex either. It's something completely different." Zara walked to the communications station. The frequency readings showed a pattern she had never seen before. The mathematical structure was similar to Kethrin communications, but much simpler. Whoever was sending this message used basic waveforms and simple encoding. "Can you clean up the signal?" she asked. Nara worked at her station for several minutes. Slowly, the static began to clear. Words started to form, spoken in a language that sounded almost musical compared to the harsh tones of Kethrin's speech. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Corps. We have received your distress signal and are responding. Human fleet en route to your position. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Hold your ground. Help is coming." The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. The command center was completely quiet. Zara felt her heart beating faster than it had in months. "Humans?" Lieutenant Dex whispered. "I have never heard of this species." "Neither have I," Zara said. She walked back to the observation window and looked out at the enemy fleet. But they heard our call for help. "Captain, what should we tell the general?" asked Nara. Zara thought about the burning cities below. She thought about her sister and all the children in the evacuation shelters. She thought about the Vex ships that would soon break through their last defenses. 72 hours seemed like forever when you only had 6. "Tell him that someone answered our message," she said. "Tell him that help is coming from a place called Earth. Tell him that we need to hold on for 3 more days." "But Captain, can we trust them? We don't know anything about these humans." Zara smiled for the first time in weeks. It was not a big smile, but it was real. "Lieutenant, we're about to lose everything. These humans traveled across space to help people they don't even know. That tells me something important about who they are." She turned back to look at the enemy fleet. The dark shapes were still there, still moving closer to her world. But now something else was moving through space toward them. Something unknown, something that might change everything. "Send a message back to the humans," she ordered. "Tell them we received their transmission. Tell them we will hold our ground as long as we can. And tell them that the Kethrin people will never forget their courage." As the message went out into the darkness between stars, Zara allowed herself to hope again. Help was coming from Earth, wherever that was. In 72 hours, they would learn what humans could do. Commander Jake Sullivan stood in the navigation room of the EDS Liberty, watching the star charts with growing concern. The route to Kethrin space would take them through areas where no human ship had ever traveled. The computer showed red warning symbols across half the projected path. "Commander, the hyperspace readings are getting worse," said Navigator Tony Clark. He pointed to the display, showing massive energy storms blocking their route. "These distortions could tear our ships apart if we hit them at full speed." Jake studied the readings. The storms were unlike anything in Earth's databases. They seemed to move and change pattern every few hours, as if they were alive. No wonder the Kethrin territory had remained isolated from the rest of the galaxy. "How long to go around them?" he asked. "At least 2 weeks, sir. Maybe longer if we hit more storms." 2 weeks. Jake thought about the desperate message they had received from the Kethrins. The aliens had said they could hold for maybe 6 hours when they sent their plea for help. That was already 48 hours ago. Going around the storms meant arriving to find nothing but empty space and dead worlds. "We go through," Jake decided. "Reduce speed to half normal and keep all sensors at maximum. Tell the other ships to follow our exact path." The fleet consisted of 3 battle groups with 12 ships total. The Liberty led the way as the command vessel, followed by the assault carrier Freedom's Edge and the destroyer Thunderbolt. Behind them came supply ships, medical vessels, and troop transports carrying 5,000 human Marines. Admiral Lisa Carter had given Jake clear orders before they left Earth. Get to Kethrin space as fast as possible. Help them fight off this Vex collective. Show the galaxy that humans keep their promises. In the medical bay of the Liberty, Dr. Helen Price prepared for the worst. She had read every report Earth's computers could find about hyperspace sickness. Extended travel through dimensional storms caused hallucinations, memory loss, and sometimes complete mental breakdown. "Doctor, we're getting the first cases," said Nurse Amy Foster, bringing in a crew member who was shaking and sweating. "Petty Officer Williams says he can see things that aren't there." Helen examined the patient. His pupils were different sizes, and he kept looking at empty corners of the room. "It's starting faster than I expected. Get me the emergency medical supplies. We're going to need the new stabilizing drugs." On the bridge, Jake felt the ship shake as they hit the edge of the first energy storm. The lights flickered and strange colors flashed outside the windows. The hyperspace engines made sounds they were not supposed to make. "Hull stress is within acceptable limits," reported Chief Engineer Ryan Clark over the communication system. "But I'm seeing energy readings I don't understand. These storms are not natural, Commander." "What do you mean, not natural?" "The patterns are too organized. It's like something is controlling them, keeping ships from traveling through this region." Jake thought about that as they pushed deeper into the storm. If someone or something was creating these barriers, they did not want visitors reaching Kethrin space. That made him even more determined to get there. Captain Steve Morgan piloted the scout ship Ranger ahead of the main fleet. His job was to find safe passages through the worst parts of the storms. The small ship bounced and rolled as energy waves hit it from all directions. "Ranger to Liberty," he called over the radio. "I'm seeing something you need to know about. There are ship parts floating in the storm, lots of them." Jake moved to the communication station. "What kind of ships?" "Unknown design, Commander. The metal is unlike anything I've seen. It looks organic, like it grew instead of being built. And there's something else. Some of the pieces are still moving." Before Jake could respond, the Liberty's sensors detected massive objects approaching from deeper in the storm. The shapes were too large to be natural debris and too irregular to be normal ships. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "All hands to combat positions." The alarm bells rang throughout the ship as the crew prepared for possible contact with hostile forces. Through the swirling energy of the hyperspace storm, dark shapes became visible. They were ships, but not like any human vessel. They looked like giant sea creatures with smooth curves and flowing lines. "Commander, they're not attacking," said Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis from the weapons station. "They're just watching us." Jake studied the alien vessels through the main viewer. There were 5 of them, each one the size of a human cruiser. They moved through the energy storm as if it did not affect them at all. "Try to open communications," he said. Communications officer Lisa Rodriguez worked at her station for several minutes. "I'm getting something, Commander. Very weak signal." The voice that came through the speakers was musical and sad. The words were in a language Jake had never heard, but somehow he understood the meaning. The ship's computer was translating in real time. "Who are you that travels the forbidden paths? Why do you seek the dying worlds?" Jake picked up the communication device. "This is Commander Jake Sullivan of the human fleet. We received a distress call from the Kethran Confederacy. We're going to help them fight the Vex Collective." There was a long silence. Then the alien voice spoke again, and this time it sounded surprised. "You travel so far to help strangers? The storms have kept all visitors away for many cycles. We thought no one cared what happened in our region of space." "The humans care," Jake said. "Can you help us reach Kethran space faster?" Another pause. Then the alien ships began to move. They formed a formation around the human fleet, their hulls glowing with soft light. "Follow us, humans from Earth. We will guide you through the safe paths. Perhaps there is still hope for the galaxy if species like yours exist." The mysterious ships led the human fleet through passages in the energy storms that did not show up on any scanner. They moved quickly now, covering in hours what would have taken days. Jake began to think they might actually reach the Kethrans in time. As they traveled, Dr. Helen Price continued treating crew members suffering from hyperspace sickness. But she noticed something interesting. The closer they got to Kethran space, the more determined her patients became to complete the mission. Even those hallucinating spoke about helping the aliens who had called for aid. Finally, after 6 days of dangerous travel, the energy storms began to clear. Ahead of them, normal space appeared with stars that matched the Kethran navigation charts. They had made it through the forbidden region. "Commander," called Navigator Tony Clark, "I'm detecting multiple signals ahead. Some are Kethran emergency beacons, others are unknown." Jake looked at the display showing dozens of contacts in the space ahead. Some were moving toward what had to be Kethran worlds. Others were moving away, fleeing from something terrible. "All ships prepare for combat," he ordered. "We're about to find out what the Vex Collective is really like." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethros system to find a battle already raging. Commander Jake Sullivan stared at the main display in shock. The enemy ships were nothing like anything in Earth's military databases. Vex vessels looked alive. They moved like swimming creatures through space, their hulls pulsing with organic light. Some were small and fast like sharks. Others were massive beyond belief, larger than entire human space stations. Their surfaces rippled and changed as Jake watched, growing new weapons and armor in real time. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Colonel Sam Davis from the weapons station. "They're biological. The ships are actually living things. Around the planet below, the remains of the Kethran defense fleet fought desperately against impossible odds. Jake could see explosions flashing like fireflies as Kethran ships died one by one. The orbital defense stations were already gone, leaving only wreckage floating in space. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface," said Communications Officer Lisa Rodriguez. "It's Captain Zara Velketh." The hologram appeared showing the Kethran officer Jake had spoken with during their journey. She looked exhausted and her silver skin was covered with cuts and burns. Behind her he could see sparks flying from damaged equipment. "Commander Sullivan, thank the stars you made it," she said. "But I fear you may have arrived too late. The Vex broke through our last orbital defenses 6 hours ago. They're landing ground forces on the northern continent." Jake studied the tactical display. 3 massive Vex bioships were moving toward the planet while smaller vessels swarmed around them like insects. The human fleet was outnumbered at least 10 to 1. "Captain, we're going to help you push them back," Jake said. "But first I need to know everything about their weapons and defenses." "Our energy weapons barely scratch their hulls," Zara replied. "They seem to adapt to whatever we hit them with. Our plasma cannons worked for a few minutes, then the ships grew new armor that absorbed the energy. The same thing happened with our particle beams and fusion torpedoes." Jake looked at his weapons officer. Human ships carried very different armaments than the Kethrans. Instead of energy-based weapons, they used old-fashioned kinetic guns and explosive missiles. Would primitive projectiles work where advanced energy weapons had failed? "All ships, this is Commander Sullivan," he announced over the fleet communication system. "We're going in hot. Target the smaller bioships first. Use conventional rounds and high explosive warheads. Let's see how they handle good old human firepower." The destroyer Thunderbolt led the attack under Captain Nina Rodriguez. Her ship accelerated toward a group of medium-sized Vex vessels that were bombarding Kethran ground positions. The bioships noticed the approaching human vessel and turned to face this new threat. Streams of green acid shot from the Vex ships toward the Thunderbolt. Captain Rodriguez rolled her ship to avoid the worst of the attack, but some of the biological weapons struck the hull. Alarms sounded as the acid began eating through the outer armor. "Damage control teams to Sections 7 and 12, Nina called over the intercom. "Return fire with all forward guns." The Thunderbolt's main cannons opened up with solid metal slugs traveling at incredible speed. The projectiles punched straight through the organic hull of the nearest Vex ship, causing bright blue fluid to spray out into space. The bioship writhed in what looked like pain. "Direct hit," reported the weapons officer. "The target is leaking atmosphere and slowing down." Nina smiled grimly. "Hit it again. All guns, continuous fire." More kinetic rounds slammed into the wounded Vex vessel. Unlike energy weapons that the creatures could adapt to, the simple physics of high-speed metal was something they had never encountered. The bioship's hull ruptured in multiple places before it finally stopped moving. On the assault carrier Freedom's Edge, Major Chris Bennett prepared his Marines for ground combat. The reports from the planet's surface described Vex forces that were part machine and part biological horror. His troops would be fighting enemies that had once been captured Kethrans, transformed into something unrecognizable. "Listen up, people," Chris announced to his company commanders. "We're going down to help evacuate Kethran civilians and hold defensive positions until the fleet clears the orbital zone. The enemy ground forces are a mix of biomechanical warriors and infected locals. Rules of engagement are simple. If it's trying to kill you or the civilians, put it down hard." Sergeant Kevin Walsh checked his equipment one more time. His squad carried the latest human infantry weapons: electromagnetic rifles, plasma grenades, and armor-piercing rockets. The gear was designed to work in any environment against any enemy. "Sarge, what if our weapons don't work either?" asked Private Danny Cooper, a young Marine on his first combat mission. Kevin looked at the worried faces of his squad. "Kid, human weapons have one advantage over all that fancy alien stuff. We keep things simple. A bullet is a bullet, whether you're fighting humans or monsters. Just remember your training and watch out for your buddies." Back on the Liberty's bridge, Jake coordinated the overall battle as more human ships engaged the Vex fleet. The Freedom's Edge launched assault shuttles toward the planet, while the cruiser Valiant provided covering fire with its heavy guns. "Commander, the Kethrin ships are joining our attack formation," reported Navigator Tony Clark. "They're following our tactical patterns." Jake nodded with satisfaction. The surviving Kethrin vessels had seen human weapons actually damage the bioships and were staying close to take advantage of the protection. Working together, the combined fleet was beginning to push the Vex forces back from the planet. Captain Steve Morgan piloted his scout ship Ranger through the battle zone, gathering intelligence on enemy movements. What he discovered made his blood run cold. "Liberty, this is Ranger," he called over the radio. "You need to see this. I'm sending you sensor readings from the outer system." The data appeared on Jake's command display. More Vex bioships were approaching, dozens of them. They had been hiding behind the system's outer planets, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Estimated time to arrival?" Jake asked. 40 minutes, Commander, and there's something else. The big ones are carrying landing craft. Thousands of them." Jake realized the Vex had been using the orbital battle as a distraction. Their real plan was a massive ground invasion that would overwhelm any defense. Even with human help, there was no way to stop that many enemy troops from reaching the planet. "All ships, new orders," he announced. "We need to break off orbital combat and focus on ground support. The real battle is about to begin on the surface." As the human fleet repositioned to defend the planet below, Major Chris Bennett's Marines launched toward the surface in their assault shuttles. They were flying directly into the largest ground battle any human had ever seen. Dr. Helen Price prepared the medical bays for massive casualties. She had treated injuries from hyperspace travel and minor combat wounds, but nothing had prepared her for what was coming. Soon she would be dealing with wounds from weapons that no human doctor had ever seen. The battle for Kethros Prime was about to begin, and the fate of an entire species hung in the balance. Major Chris Bennett's assault shuttle broke through the clouds above Kethros Prime as enemy fire exploded around them. Through the smoke and flames, he could see the Kethrin capital city below. Half of it was burning. The other half was covered in a strange organic growth that pulsed with sickly green light. 30 seconds to landing zone," called the pilot over the intercom. "Ground fire is heavy. We're going in fast and hard." Chris checked his rifle one more time and looked at his Marines. They were scared, but ready. Most had never seen combat this intense, but they trusted their training and each other. That would have to be enough. The shuttle hit the ground hard, sending everyone forward in their safety straps. Before it even stopped moving, the rear door dropped open and Chris led his troops out into hell. The landing zone was supposed to be secure, but Vex bio-warriors were already waiting. The creatures had once been Kethrins, but now they looked like nightmares. Their bodies were covered in chitinous armor that had grown from their own flesh. Extra arms sprouted from their backs, each one holding a different organic weapon. "Contact front," shouted Sergeant Kevin Walsh. "Light them up." The Marines opened fire with their electromagnetic rifles. The bullets punched through the bioarmor that had stopped Kethrin energy weapons. Green fluid sprayed from the wounds as the transformed creatures fell, but more kept coming from the organic structures growing throughout the city. "Major, we've got civilians trapped in that building," called Corporal Lisa Martinez, pointing to a damaged structure where Kethrin faces could be seen in the windows. Chris divided his forces. Half would secure the landing zone for more shuttles. The other half would rescue civilians and establish defensive positions. It was exactly the kind of flexible thinking that made human tactics so effective. Back in space, Admiral Lisa Carter watched the battle from the bridge of the command ship Valiant. The Vex reinforcement fleet was getting closer, and she needed a way to stop them before they reached the planet. Standard naval tactics would not work against an enemy that could adapt to any attack. "Captain Steve, I have a special mission for you," she said over the communication system to the scout ship Ranger. "Ready for orders, Admiral. Take your ship and get behind enemy lines. I want you to target their supply vessels and biofactories. Hit them fast and disappear before they can respond." Steve Morgan understood immediately. Instead of fighting the enemy fleet directly, they would attack the support systems that kept the bioships alive. It was guerrilla warfare in space, something No other species had ever tried. The Ranger activated its stealth systems and vanished from sensors. Steve piloted the small ship through the asteroid field on the edge of the system, using the rocks as cover. Behind the main Vex fleet, he found what he was looking for. Massive organic structures floated in space like artificial planets. They were growing new bioships and producing the biological weapons the Vex used in battle. These factory ships were the heart of the enemy war machine. Ranger to all human vessels, Steve called on a secure channel. I've found their production facilities. Sending coordinates now. These things are barely defended. Admiral Carter smiled as she received the data. All ships with long-range weapons target those coordinates. Fire everything you have. Nuclear missiles launched from human ships across the battle zone. The Vex had never faced atomic weapons before. Their bioships could adapt to energy attacks, but nuclear explosions created temperatures and radiation that no living thing could survive. The factory ships died in brilliant flashes of light. Months of Vex production was destroyed in seconds. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy was losing resources faster than they could replace them. On the planet's surface, Colonel Diana Bell worked with Kethrin resistance fighters to coordinate attacks on Vex ground installations. The aliens were amazed by human weapons and tactics. "These explosive devices are so simple," said Kethrin resistance leader Jax Velthorn as Diana showed him how to use plastic explosives. "But they work better than our most advanced demolition tools." "Sometimes simple is better," Diana replied. "Complex systems can fail. A good old-fashioned bomb just goes boom." The resistance fighters learned quickly. Soon they were sabotaging Vex biofactories across the planet. The organic structures that had seemed invincible began collapsing as humans taught the Kethrins how to fight dirty. Major Elena Santos led a special operations team deep into enemy territory. Their mission was to plant experimental quantum devices inside the largest Vex bioships. The weapons were untested and extremely dangerous, but they represented the only hope of disrupting the Vex collective consciousness. Elena and her team moved through the twisted corridors of a captured Kethrin city. The walls were covered in organic growth that pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange sounds echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "Contact," whispered Sergeant Tony Miller as shapes moved in the shadows ahead. The Vex guards were different from the bio-warriors they had fought before. These creatures were pure alien, never having been Kethrin. They moved like insects, fast and unpredictable. Elena's team used flashbang grenades to disorient the guards, then moved in with close combat weapons. The fight was brutal and quick. The quantum devices had to be planted exactly right, or they would kill everyone within miles instead of just disrupting Vex communications. Meanwhile, Dr. Helen Price worked frantically in the field hospital that had been set up in a secure area of the city. She treated wounded Marines and Kethrin civilians, learning how to deal with injuries from biological weapons she had never seen before. "Doctor, we've got another Marine with bioacid burns," called Nurse Amy Foster, bringing in a wounded soldier. Helen had developed new treatments by combining human medical knowledge with Kethrin healing techniques. The aliens used genetic therapy in ways humans had never thought of, while human drugs could counter biological toxins that no Kethrin medicine could handle. "Mix the neutralizing agent with their cellular regenerator," Helen told Amy. "The combination works better than either one alone." As the battle continued, Chief Petty Officer Tony Miller helped Kethrin engineers modify human weapons for mass production. The aliens were fascinated by the simplicity of human military technology. "Your projectile weapons use basic physics," said engineer Vex Kelnara. "We always thought more complex was better. But your simple guns work when our energy weapons fail." Tony showed them how to manufacture bullets and gunpowder using materials available on their world. Soon, Kethrin resistance fighters were armed with human-designed rifles that could actually hurt the Vex bio-warriors. Back in space, the tide of battle was turning. The Vex fleet had lost its production capability and was running low on biological ammunition. Human ships continued to use hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and fast before disappearing into hyperspace. Captain Nina Rodriguez commanded a small squadron of destroyers that appeared behind enemy lines, launched their missiles, and jumped away before the bioships could respond. The Vex collective mind could not predict or counter such chaotic tactics. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is starting to fragment," reported Captain Rodriguez over the communication system. "They seem confused without their factory ships." Admiral Carter nodded with satisfaction. The Vex had always relied on their ability to adapt and evolve during battle. But human unpredictability was something their collective consciousness could not process. Every time they adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. As the fourth day of battle ended, the situation had changed completely. The Vex were no longer advancing. For the first time since their invasion began, they were retreating from multiple positions. The impossible was happening. The unstoppable enemy was being stopped by species they had never encountered before. But the final battle still lay ahead, and everyone knew it would determine the fate of not just the Kethrin people, but the entire galaxy. The final Vex fleet arrived at Kethros Prime like a storm of living darkness. Admiral Lisa Carter watched from the bridge of the Valiant as hundreds of bioships emerged from hyperspace. Each one was larger than anything they had fought before, their hulls covered in weapons that pulsed with organic light. "Admiral, sensor readings show at least 300 enemy vessels," reported Navigator Paul Adams. "The largest one is the size of a small moon." Lisa studied the massive bioship at the center of the enemy formation. It had to be the command vessel, the brain that controlled the entire Vex fleet. If they could destroy it, the rest of the enemy ships might lose their coordination. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," she announced over the fleet communication system. "This is what we came here to do. The Kethrins are counting on us. Earth is counting on us. The galaxy is counting on us. Let's show these creatures what humans can do when we fight for something bigger than ourselves." Commander Jake Sullivan coordinated the attack from the Liberty. The human fleet was outnumbered 20-1, but they had advantages the enemy did not expect. Human ships could think independently, make quick decisions, and change tactics without asking permission from a central command. "All vessels, spread. Formation," Jake ordered. "Don't give them a single target to focus on. Hit them from every angle and keep moving." The battle began as human ships scattered across the system like a swarm of angry bees. The Vex bioships tried to form their usual attack formations, but the humans refused to fight in predictable patterns. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they struck from unexpected directions and disappeared before the bioships could respond. Captain Nina Rodriguez led her destroyer squadron in a daring attack on the command ship's outer defenses. The massive biovessel was protected by dozens of smaller ships that moved around it like swimming guards. "Thunderbolt to all ships in my group," Nina called over the radio. "We're going to punch a hole in their defensive screen. Follow my lead, and don't stop shooting until we're through." The human destroyers charged straight at the enemy formation, their guns blazing. Kinetic rounds and explosive missiles tore through bioship hulls that had never been designed to handle such primitive but effective weapons. Green fluid sprayed into space as the organic vessels died one by one. On the planet's surface, Major Chris Bennett led the final assault on the Vex Ground Command Center. The organic structure had grown from the ruins of the Kethrin Capitol building, reaching high into the sky like a twisted tower of living flesh. "This is it, Marines," Chris told his troops as they prepared for the attack. "Inside that thing is the brain that controls all Vex ground forces on this planet. We take it out and every bio-warrior down here stops working." Sergeant Kevin Walsh looked up at the pulsing tower. Strange lights moved under its surface, and he could hear sounds that made his skin crawl. "How do we get inside that thing, Major?" Chris smiled grimly and patted the explosive charges on his belt. "We knock on the door. Load up with everything you've got. We're going in loud and messy." The Marines attacked the base of the tower with rocket launchers and plasma grenades. The organic walls tried to heal themselves, but human explosives did more damage than the structure could repair. Soon they had blasted a hole large enough to enter. Inside the tower, the walls were alive. They moved and breathed like the inside of some giant creature. Bio-warriors waited in the twisted corridors, their weapons ready. But the Marines had fought these enemies before and knew their weaknesses. "Stay together and watch your corners," Kevin shouted as they moved deeper into the structure. "These things are tough, but they die just like everything else when you hit them hard enough." In space, Major Elena Santos finally reached her target. Her special operations team had infiltrated the massive command ship through a damaged section of hull. Now they moved through corridors that looked more like the inside of a living animal than a spacecraft. "The quantum charges are armed and ready," Elena reported over her helmet radio. "We just need to reach the central nervous system of this thing." The devices they carried would disrupt the bioelectrical signals that allowed the Vex collective consciousness to function. If they could plant the charges in the right place, the entire enemy fleet would lose its ability to coordinate attacks. Strange creatures moved through the ship's corridors. They looked like a cross between machines and sea animals, with tentacles that sparked with electrical energy. Elena's team used stealth and silence to avoid most of them, but sometimes they had to fight. "Contact rear," whispered Corporal Mark Thompson as one of the creatures spotted them. The team opened fire with silenced weapons, dropping the BioGuard before it could raise an alarm. They dragged the body into a side passage and continued toward their target. Back on the bridge of the Valiant, Admiral Carter watched the battle reach its climax. Human ships were taking heavy damage, but they had managed to break through the enemy defenses. The massive command ship was exposed and vulnerable. "All ships with heavy weapons target the command vessel," she ordered. "Hit it with everything we have." Nuclear missiles streaked toward the bioship from every direction. The creature tried to defend itself, growing new armor and weapons, but it was too late. The first explosions tore holes in its hull, and more missiles poured through the gaps. Deep inside the command ship, Elena Santos reached the central chamber. The room was filled with a massive brain-like structure that pulsed with electricity. Cables made of living tissue connected it to every part of the ship. "This is it," Elena said, placing the quantum charges around the organic computer. "When these go off, this thing won't be able to think anymore." She activated the timer and led her team toward the escape route they had planned. They had 3 minutes to get clear before the charges exploded. On the planet's surface, Chris Bennett's Marines fought their way to the top of the biotower. The final chamber contained a smaller version of the space-based command brain. Catherine civilians hung from the walls in organic pods, being slowly converted into bio-warriors. "Free the prisoners," Chris ordered. "Kevin, set the charges. We're bringing this whole thing down." The Marines worked quickly to cut the Catherines free from their pods, while Kevin placed explosives throughout the chamber. The organic walls tried to stop them, growing spikes and releasing toxic gases, but human determination was stronger than alien biology. "Charges set, Major," Kevin reported. 2 minutes until detonation. "Everyone out," Chris shouted. "Move, move, move." The quantum charges exploded simultaneously in space and on the ground. The massive command ship convulsed as its central brain died, sending electrical storms throughout its hull. On the planet, the biotower collapsed in a shower of sparks and organic debris. Across the battle zone, Vex bioships suddenly stopped moving in formation. Without their collective consciousness to guide them, individual ships began acting randomly. Some continued fighting, others tried to flee, and many simply drifted helplessly in space. Captain Steve Morgan, piloting his scout ship through the chaos, reported what everyone could see. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is falling apart. They've lost all coordination." Admiral Carter smiled as she watched Vex ships colliding with each other in their confusion. "All ships press the attack. Don't give them time to reorganize." The battle that followed was more like hunting than fighting. Human and Catherine ships worked together to destroy the scattered bio-vessels one by one. Without their hive mind, the Vex were just individual animals, dangerous but not intelligent. Dr. Helen Price treated the last casualties of the war in her field hospital. Human Marines and Catherine civilians worked side by side to clear the organic growth from their cities. The nightmare was finally over. Captain Zara Velketh stood once again on her observation deck, but now she watched human and Catherine ships working together to rebuild what had been destroyed. The stars looked friendly again, no longer hidden by enemy fleets. "Commander Sullivan," she said over the communication system to Jake on the Liberty, "the Catherine people will never forget what humanity did for us. You came from across the galaxy to save people you had never met. Jake looked out at the peaceful scene below. That's what neighbors do for each other, Captain. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a long friendship. Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy through secret communication networks. Other species who had hidden from the Vex began to emerge from their shelters. The seemingly invincible enemy had been defeated by newcomers who fought with honor and courage. The war was over, but the legend of the day human troops landed and changed. Everything had just begun. Across known space, other species would remember that no enemy is truly unbeatable when good people stand together against darkness. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors of those who could not protect themselves.